As we continue today's program, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge something that touches every single one of us: climate change. Whether we realize it or not, we're all living with its impact every day, and there's no one in this room who won't be affected by it in some way. But here's the hopeful part. There are brilliant people at work who are dedicated to finding solutions. They're developing groundbreaking innovations that help us not only adapt to our changing world, but also build a more resilient future. Halcyon is proud to support entrepreneurs across the globe who are tackling these challenges head-on, working in areas like renewable energy, green building technologies, sustainable agriculture, and more. Earlier this year, we hosted our first climate residential cohort, and next year we'll have no fewer than 4 programs that aim to tackle climate challenges head-on. Let's welcome the next panel to the stage and hear solutions about some of their innovative solutions.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. So I'm pleased to moderate this esteemed panel. We're going to be talking about climate change. It is quite near and dear to my heart. I am coming from a tech background, and so what I've found, at least between the difference between the two spaces, is that climate change, at least to the average Joe, doesn't seem as exciting as technology. And so one of my personal missions is to really push that narrative to make climate change sexy again, or at least sexy for the first time in a real way, so that we can take advantage of the things that we're doing. But today I have Irene, I have Anderson, and I have Seth. And so I'm going to give you guys just a few seconds to introduce yourselves. Starting with you, Irene.
Thank you, and thank you to the Halcyon team for the invitation. Great to be in this summit with all of you. I'm Irene Arias Hofman. I'm the CEO of IDB Lab. IDB Lab is the innovation and venture capital arm of the Inter-American Development Bank. For those of you who know the multilateral development bank system, IDB is the only multilateral that has a dedicated innovation and VC arm. So we are there to really take more risk that is harder for the public arm, for IDB, or for our main private sector arm, IDB Invest, to take. And that includes supporting climate tech companies. We've funded over 300 of them in the last few years, and look forward to discussing what are the gaps and opportunities ahead.
Anderson?
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm Anderson Barkow, one of the co-founders and CFO at BoxPower. I was a Halcyon fellow in 2019, and really a pleasure to see everybody again. At BoxPower, we're really reimagining how people in rural areas get power. We build these off-grid solar power plants or solar microgrids that provide power to these rural customers as an alternative to a distribution line getting hardened or upgraded or built for the first time. And we've got about 60 projects in some stage of construction across North America, and excited to chat about climate.
Hi there, I'm Seth Goldman. It's great to be back with Halcyon. I was with the first class 10 years ago and excited to see how it's grown since then. The companies I'm involved in all sort of fall under this umbrella we call Eat the Change. And it's all about recognizing that what we eat is our single biggest daily impact on the planet. And so starting with Honest Tea, then going on to an organic baby food company called Happy Baby. And then I'm now chair of the board of Beyond Meat. And then when Honest Tea got discontinued, which was a sad moment for a week, and then I realized it was an amazing opportunity, and we've just relaunched Just Iced Tea, which just this month became...
Same formula.
Just this month has become as large as Honest Tea was. So we're 2 years in with Just Iced Tea, and we're now as large as Honest Tea was after its 10th year. So we're off to a fast start growing. And thank you. And then the last venture is a restaurant chain called PLNT Burger, or Plant Burger, or Planet Burger, depending on your preference. And so all about how do we get people to develop more consciousness about their diets, and how do we make brands and restaurants and occasions for them to have choices where they can eat the change towards a better climate.
Nice. Congratulations to both of you. Irene, so I've been reflecting with you backstage. So for context, so I happen to run an ocean farm. We focus on like climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I was reflecting to you that some of the main challenges that we had with respect to operating was financing. And I also reflected that we had been doing this dance with IDB for a few years. And so from your perspective, I wanted to get a more clearer understanding of like what are the biggest challenges for early stage companies or climate change solutions, and with respect to financing or at least accessing capital. I wanted to kind of share how the IDB lab is addressing some of these challenges, and what promising new tools that you guys might have up your sleeve that we can probably be aware of today.
All right, thanks. So first, IDB Lab has a mandate to support companies that can show an impact in any of the 26 countries that are part of Latin America and the Caribbean. They can be headquartered somewhere else, but we want to see the impact there. So to begin with, one of the challenges is that the level of maturity of the entrepreneurial system in these countries is so varied and it's rather fragmented in general. And when it comes to climate, even more. So the solution is by no means a one-size-fits-all solution. And it's also not just about the financing. So we do provide financing. We think that there's still a huge gap. Overall, VC investment in Latin America and the Caribbean is only 0.01% of GDP, so it's way behind other regions. And when it comes to climate, it's much, much, much smaller. And so first of all is making sure that we can put enough capital. We deploy about 100 million a year, and we mobilize several times more. That's just a drop in the ocean. So we do need to have a funding, yes, and we do it in the form of loans, equity directly into the startups or the other types of entrepreneurs. Sometimes they are not super high growth tech startups. Sometimes for certain areas, they are more like in forestry or community development, or in regenerative agriculture. They tend to be a little bit more traditional businesses or sustainable growth businesses that require less equity, perhaps can absorb more debt. So we do see that there's still a huge gap in those products, and also in terms of finding the right intermediaries, because sometimes we're not super efficient doing it directly. So we have backed as limited partners over 100 VC funds. And we see that a higher and higher percentage every year when they apply to us, and about 140 apply every year, a higher and higher percentage have a climate thesis, or at least a focus. More than 25% of their portfolio will be in climate tech. So that's good news. We'll keep doing that. But the second piece is knowledge, connections, systems, the systems around it. So we do have some grant funding that can help on that front to make sure that we create the conditions for the scalability of those investments as well. That again, it's all about the right product for the right maturity level of the company, and the if you are an entrepreneur that is between seed and Series B, we are your right fit. Otherwise, we have other solutions as part of the IDB group or other intermediaries that can support you in other stages. And I'm hoping that we can do something together in Jamaica. That was his pitch earlier.
As somebody who also runs a farm, Seth, I know we think about food systems a whole lot. In fact, I think we can most empathize on at least the role that it plays in our entire ecosystem in just keeping people alive. But for you, as a pioneer in your space, what role does food systems play in contributing to climate change? And what are the opportunities for leveraging our food systems to help tackle climate change? How should we be thinking about this synergy?
Yeah, so it's very easy to look at our food system and say it's an extractive industry. It basically takes resources from the earth and sort of feeds back a lot of toxic chemicals that kill off the ecosystem. And you can flip that and say, instead, we can be nurturing the planet while we feed ourselves. So organic is critical, and in terms of preserving ecosystems and the flora and fauna. Plant-based is also really important. When we look at an animal-based food system that requires 97% more water, 97% more land to make a pound of protein versus a plant-based approach, you could have dramatic change in terms of the resources we're taking from the earth to feed ourselves. And then another key element is biodiversity. There's 6 crops that represent 57% of all agricultural production, which is first bad for the diet, but also bad for the planet because you're creating homogeneity that is very susceptible to climate shocks. It's not a resilient planet. And so when we can spread more biodiversity into our diets, it's the same thing happens to the planet. It becomes more resilient. And especially as climate change is having the impact it's having, it's critical. So those are all sort of science-based approaches. The challenge is how do you convert that into a delicious, fun product that people like to eat? And so that's kind of that's the work that the entrepreneur can do.
Yeah, we tend to be easily distracted,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But switching gears just a little bit, Anderson, BoxPower. You guys have been, just focusing on tackling our energy system, and BoxPower has been at the forefront of deploying renewable energy solutions. What challenges have you faced in, scaling some of these technologies, and how have you been able to overcome them? I know from speaking to you before, you guys are mainly in California, but you have a lot of work just scattered throughout North America. How are you trying to build capacity in that way?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's been 8 years of significant challenges, and they keep popping up. And I think one of the biggest ones for us is working within the current ecosystem, right? And that means working with utilities themselves. And so utilities are our main customers across California, Washington, Oregon. We just submitted a bid with JPS yesterday, so
Yes.
hopefully expanding
Wait,
more.
you said JPS?
Yeah.
As in my JPS?
Yeah.
Jamaica?
Yeah.
Oof.
But with those entities, they are behemoths that have the scale to help you scale, but they also have a particular way of doing business, are highly regulated, and with that comes a lot of challenges, from cash flow to being patient to waiting 8 years. And so I think one of my big lessons is just patience and planning for really, really long times to deployment. And I think fortunately we've been really conservative with our fiscal planning, and that's helped us stand the test of time and now be at a place where we're a lot more comfortable with a wide number of projects across utilities.
Sticking on that trend though, Anderson, so I guess since you come into Jamaica, hopefully, what do you see as some of the other biggest opportunities, within the next few years for entrepreneurs in your space?
Yeah, I think one big area that's catchy recently is bring your own power. So as we think about what's happening with the grid right now, with the electrification of everything, including EVs, including AI coming online, but including just a lot more manufacturing also coming back to the US, is this massive increase in demand on the utility grid in places that the utility never expected that demand to happen. And so what that's going to look like is either the utilities figuring out how to deploy systems more quickly, or companies and industry having to figure out how to bring their own power to these places. And so that's one trend we're really excited about. It involves lots of, battery technology, involves lots of generation in a distributed way. And so I think that's one particular area we're pretty excited about.
Seth, I guess same thing for you though. What is the future of I guess climate change innovation for entrepreneurs, or want to be entrepreneurs within the space?
Yeah,
should we also focus on tea? Should we? What is it?
Well, I'm certainly focused on food because, as I said, that's such an area of impact. But it's also an area of opportunity because for so long, for decades, most of our food choices have been monopolized by a handful of companies. And so I think consumers now are fed up with that and want to have a more diversity of choices. They also have the ability they're empowered now either to buy directly or to go away from, call it big food. And so I think what's exciting now is we see a lot of entrepreneurs come up, and I think I guess in all sectors, but if I feel it particularly in food, a lot of companies go under. They don't make it. And so finding the right path, and the plant-based space has been through a shakeout. It's been a tough, past 18 months. But what we see now is sort of, and part of that was due to a reaction from the established industries, meat and dairy. What we're seeing now is that consumers are basically coming back to, okay, no, this does still make sense. And then it's, challenge for the companies. You still have to make it delicious. You still have to make it fun. And you still have to make, the nutritional profile competitive. And we're seeing that. So I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to think about plant-based meat, but I do think there's other plant-based analogs where there's opportunity.
See, Irene, I know that you at least more so take a high-level purview at looking at the general landscape with respect to deploying money. Where do you see the pockets or the gaps that currently exist for potential climate entrepreneurs that you guys would like to probably put money into that you probably haven't had the chance to, or even want to see movements in that area?
Yeah, so definitely, and if you think about the opportunities that entrepreneurs may have in Latin America and the Caribbean, two things come to mind. The first is agriculture, and Latin America and the Caribbean being the largest net exporter of agriculture in the world. So there is a massive opportunity to improve the whole chain, to make it more sustainable, and to all the great things that Seth has done here, doing it, but with the endowment that Latin America and the Caribbean has. We have seen huge successes already. We have seen funds like Gridex, they work with SOSV, and they are really going into scientific discoveries as well in terms of new proteins, and looking at really research-based solutions that can transform the means of production as well. But others like the Yield Lab or SP Ventures that are backing companies that are helping more in terms of the value chain. So, for example, Arado, it used to be called Clicampo. It's a company in Brazil, and they are actually transforming completely as a marketplace the ability for small producers to get more for their product and get it better to customers that want that diversified choice. And that's also something that people in Latin America and the Caribbean and the rest of the world demand. So that can be, I think Latin America is a powerhouse for these kind of solutions. And the second is biodiversity, because you have Latin America and the Caribbean with less than 15% of the arable of the land mass in the world, and more than 50% of the biodiversity. But it does take time, and it requires, if for renewable energy, which is the most invested category in climate, it takes patient capital. For biodiversity solutions, it takes even more, or nature-based solutions, even more patient capital. So, but those are the two big buckets. And then, generally speaking, because so much it has been done in mitigation compared to adaptation, we think that there is a lot to do in adaptation as well, in general, across the board.
And I think one thing just to add on would be that a lot of climate requires physical construction, physical infrastructure to be built. And I think there's all these great technologies that people have and that are getting funded, but not a lot of construction innovation is happening. And I think as we think about how can we more quickly deploy infrastructure, I think that's going to be a big theme that there's opportunity in the next 5 or 10 years.
I'm not done with you as yet, Irene. So you basically said that biodiversity is something that we need to focus on. What I have been seeing is that at least it is just very difficult to do, or at least to finance biodiversity related and nature-based solution projects. Are there any more unique, at least tricks that you guys probably have, or you personally are thinking about with respect to how to support some of these more ambiguous projects that need a lot of support to get to the capacity of, say, the engineered solutions with respect to renewable tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, Terrazos is an example we were talking about earlier. A company in Colombia, they have been able to preserve a lot of forestry, building what they call habitat banks and measuring the value of that and the ecosystem services and issuing tokens. We know that, again, it's not just the financing that they need, it's the entire system around it and the regulatory environment as well. So we launched an initiative called Natura Tech to help build those systems in not just in Colombia, but in other countries, so that companies and entrepreneurs like you who are actually on building the ecosystem services don't have to do all that legwork. But it's much more complex for sure than some of the other solutions we were talking about, like this, like Arado, like this marketplace. So we take a portfolio approach, but we do want to make sure that we do enough to preserve the biodiversity and building companies. So again, he's pitching for his company. We're gonna have to do something together.
Definitely. I know we're running short on time, but I want to squeeze things in. Seth, as a fellow biodiversity entrepreneur, what do you think? What more do you think that we need with respect to unique financing opportunities to kind of push the needle?
Yeah, I mean, for most food entrepreneurs, it's angel funding, right? So
right.
That's just a lot of legwork. We actually at Plantburger are just about to start a crowdfunding campaign. It's something we've never done before, but and I've always had a little hesitation because I've seen so many of these things not work out well. But I feel like, the business, when it gets to a certain point, you can democratize these, and so being able to tap, especially food brands where you usually have a wide base, letting not just democratizing the food, but democratizing access to these kinds of investments could be an interesting path. We haven't done it yet, so I'll check back next year and let you know.
Okay, thank you. I think this is it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tolerating and accepting us.